Right, hello everyone. Welcome back. I'm Richard Beaumont, Procurement.
And I'm Claire Green, Finance.
There we go. And today we're not going to talk about anything to do with procurement or finance. We're actually going to do a very quick coffee break because, as you can imagine, we do hours of preparation before we do these things. And both of us have had recent experience of, flipping cybersecurity problems, phishing, whatever. And it just occurred to us that actually just having a quick chat about cybersecurity, which look is everyone's responsibility. It should be. This is definitely the domain of your
IT,
CIO, CXO, whatever, CTO. That's their job and that's what they're leading. But we both play a key role, largely because we probably have, particularly in sort of the biggest collective interaction with the outside world, because we're talking to suppliers. And so, look, I suppose from our perspective, we talked in an earlier Procurement Finance Coffee Break about the benefits of automation and of bringing in ERP. But if we work on the basis that most companies aren't in that automated world, they're not using big platforms, especially SMEs. Most of our business is done by email, and therefore, if you just think about it, supplier emails you an invoice. Welcome to the most obvious route for a cybersecurity attack on your business. It's a phishing email from someone who isn't your supplier with an attachment that's got no end of no good on it. So we just thought we'd have a quick chat about okay, well, what could we do? Who should you talk to? And what really are the things that we should do together as a function to do it?
So we've had a little think about what the most likely cybersecurity threats are for finance and procurement. I'm sure you've had training delivered. But let's just recap on what are the usual suspects when it comes to cybersecurity risks to finance and procurement, Richard.
Look, by far the most common, it's no different to what we all have in our day-to-day horror show of our Hotmail or Gmail or whatever we use. It's phishing attacks. It is emails that are coming purporting to be from a trusted someone you know. It's just got that normal.
I have loads actually that I was saying they're from Royal Mail.
But, yeah, exactly. Royal Mail haven't delivered, which is true. But also these are the emails that don't come from Royal Mail. DPD. I mean, anything that says you've seen hundreds of them. The typical phishing attack is your parcel's late. We need to check your address. There's an error on your account. I mean, it's all that nonsense which you look at and laugh at 99.9% of the time.
And most of the time you look at it and there's something not quite right with the presentation or the wording, and you think that's a phishing. Sometimes though you can get some pretty convincing ones,
totally convincing,
but then when I'm half convinced when I see it, that's when I look at who the sender is.
Exactly. So look, neither of us are experts in cybersecurity, but the point is that as an individual, you can recognise them most of the time, but I'd be prepared to take a bet that every single one of us has had a whoopsie moment where we've opened something that we shouldn't have opened and then had a flat panic about it, right? And we probably know someone that's been caught out by it. The point is that, if it's difficult for you to recognise in your own inbox where you know what you've been doing, imagine just how impossible it is in a mid-sized organisation with tens of thousands of emails a day going in and out of that organisation, any one of which coming in could be an attack. And therefore, it's what can you do to make sure that, for the kind of really important data and the systems that, we have access to, what can we do to play our part in protecting?
It's actually interesting to say that because just before I went on holiday, before Christmas, I got an email from my holiday company saying they had been a victim of a cybersecurity attack and that some of their systems were down. And if for any reason I needed to contact them, this was a like emergency number, and it was actually from the MD or CEO.
Right.
It must have been pretty major, but it basically sounded like they had business critical downtime for 3 or 4 days, and then I think they emailed a week later saying, "Oh, thank you for our understanding. We're back up and running now."
Right. I mean, it's a big deal, and the damage to your business can be enormous. And of course, look, although we're focused on external threats and third parties trying to do harm, there is another aspect to cybersecurity, which is protecting your own data and intellectual property from either theft or from internal damage from a disgruntled employee. There's a whole bunch of things which your CXO, your IT team will lead on making sure that you are, you're protecting yourselves.
So what are some things? So we acknowledge that this is definitely IT's domain to take to take the lead on, to create the corporate policies on, and that includes whether, let's say, employees are allowed to use USB sticks or not. For example, I've worked for some companies where you're not allowed to use. In fact, you have no USB stick in your laptops, and they deliberately do that. So that's all in IT domain to work out how they're going to mitigate these risks. But how can finance and procurement teams proactively mitigate them? So I guess training would be one.
Yeah, I think this is always going to be a common. Anything about cybersecurity, in fact, security in general, is going to be a combination of people and technology. And you can have the best trained people, but rubbish antivirus software. You could have the best technological defenses and have people that simply bypass it because they don't understand why. You have to put the two things together. So, for me, if I put it into the context of, the procurement team and the kind of interactions they're having with suppliers, the things that I'm looking at, the same things that I'm doing on my own personal phone and computer, which is, right, do I understand how to recognize and how to handle, and do I understand the kind of attacks that might come, so that I know, as we talked about, if I get an email, I question, is it genuine? And I just don't go double clicking an attachment or following a link before I've thought about whether it is or isn't.
I've actually hung up on my bank before when it was actually my bank. I didn't think it was
to do that.
I didn't think it was my bank, so exactly. I hung up on them.
But that's
fine.
To
call them back.
and the kind of advice that you can hear from all the good sort of online, particularly sort of breakfast shows, protecting particularly older or less tech savvy or threat savvy individuals. Think about your grandparent who isn't that familiar and might be more trusting in nature. Giving them the skill set to recognize what might be a problem and what to do is really important. But it has to be backed by tech. And for me, the two really important things on the tech are, firstly, before you're using tech, the IT team's got a really key role in making sure it is secure. And a big part of that is two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, which incredibly people still don't use on their own computers and phones.
I was just telling you, I made a few random purchases over the last week. And even though I do use multi-factor authentication, so I use the app to reconfirm, the bank phoned me up and said, "Oh, we're just checking that this is actually you." And I was like, "Oh, I suppose it hasn't been sort of Tesco, Waitrose, or Amazon I've purchased from, so they think it's a bit odd."
And we don't ask what she was purchasing. Now, the thing about two-factor authentication is, it's just as much about you in your personal technology as it is for you with your business technology. Pretty much every application has some kind of two-factor, whether it's an app or a text message or a separate dongle with a secure code on it. Whatever it is, use it. And that's just good advice personally and professionally. But the big one, and this is where I think procurement has a really big role to play, is that, look, we support the organisation, we support the CXO on bringing in software solutions. software goes out of date. You have to keep software up to date. You have to apply patches, updates, security updates. Different people have different kind of degrees of attitude about whether they do or don't do that. And I can talk about one of my family who will wait literally until they get told their software won't work anymore before they do an update, which is madness. But it applies just as much at work. And there's a really big thing. I mean, I helped to chair Origina Empower, and Origina do really great work with software licensing, in particular getting reselling of licenses. But one of the big points they made is, even if you yourself go and download the patches, you can't be certain that you are still achieving the right level of security inside your technology. So therefore, their big advice is bring in an expert. And internally, the expert is your IT and the cybersecurity team. But procurement can also make it possible for that cybersecurity team to get external support for people who've got breadth of experience across multiple companies to make sure that stuff's okay. Which I suppose brings it in. I mean, this isn't just a procurement finance collaboration. This is a procurement finance IT collaboration. But I mean, what do you think are the key things we need to think about as teams when we're trying to reduce the risk of a cybersecurity impact on our business?
So I think for me, having good corporate policies that finance and procurement teams can follow and be trained on is number one. For me as a ex-financial controller, I would expect the head of IT or the CIO to provide me with what the corporate policy is for a range of things, from how you check emails to what security measures should be in place. So I want to have that basic. Tell me what you want me to do as a minimum, so I can myself know and make sure my team are trained on a regular basis and are enforcing that policy. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is having good data and audit trail, especially between procurement and finance. So you don't want to be in that situation like where your processes aren't that great. Let's imagine that you make quite a lot of non-PO purchases. So you don't have great control there. Let's say for three-way match, perhaps someone sends you an invoice. Let's say there's no ransomware attached, but it's just a fraudulent invoice. So if you don't have the three-way match and you've got a good audit trail of the purchase, it could be possible that such an invoice would slip through the control processes.
And we've seen it. I mean, if anybody watched Crime Watch, there are plenty of cases where people have done that, right?
So I think so. So policies, good control, not having lots of, for example, non-PO invoices was my example, but it's basically about data and control processes. The other thing is having joint incident response plans, and I think this is kind of combined with the policy. What is the policy? What is the corporate policy for both procurement and finance teams to follow if there is an incident? What do you do? If you get what you think is a phishing email, do you direct it to a phishing inbox who they will deal with it? You don't even have to try and decide for yourself if it's phishing or not. What is the process if you think there's an issue? I think the other thing comes from around vendor management. So just like my example of if you're a company that do a lot of non-PO invoices, do you do a lot of one-time vendors? And if you do, they've got to be strong data sharing and governance around that. So you're not like an AP clerk who just thinks, oh, it's another one-off vendor invoice. You need to have a process for saying who authorized it, what the spend is anticipated with, and who can authorize that. Because again, if you have like a kind of vague process or a fuzzy process without those controls to mitigate those risks, again, it's something where potentially someone could so just send you a fraudulent invoice pretending to be a vendor of yours.
And I think, picking up on this thing about vendor management. I mean, I'm probably going to get the number wrong now. Apologies if I have. I think ISO 27001 is around cybersecurity, IT security. So in theory, a supplier who is certified to that ISO, you should have a higher degree of confidence. But nothing beats checking it. And this is where actually credibility counts for a lot. And if you're bringing on board a supplier, one of the first, I wouldn't be asking them, are you ISO 27001, or can you fill out our cyber security questionnaire? Because frankly, anybody can do it, and they'll probably use ChatGPT to fill it out as well. I would actually be asking them, please tell me whether any of the following companies have done a cybersecurity audit of you. And I'd be asking whether a bank or a telecommunication company or a technology company has done an on-site audit. Because if you go to a supplier and, for example, they say, yep, we've been fully inspected and penetration tested by, I'm making it up, British Telecom, actually that's got a lot more credibility than Richard and Clair have checked a form, because frankly we just get a form filled out. So actually don't be afraid to ask your supplier to evidence checks that have been done by companies that have got, frankly, a lot more credentials than any of us have in terms of being able to do that, and leveraging the work that other customers have done on that supplier in this space. It's no different to quality. If you can go to a supplier and they say, oh yeah, we've been quality checked by Rolls-Royce or Mercedes or BMW, they've been quality checked. Likewise, if those kinds of company have done a cybersecurity check, then you're a lot further down the road, in my view, of being confident that everything's okay. And look, looking at the future, what's going to happen? AI is going to get involved, because AI will be far cuter at spotting problems than humans ever are. Which means that, exactly as you said, we shouldn't even see things in our inbox or coming into our system. But if things do slip through, it should be incredibly simple just to press a button to say, I'm worried, and it goes off to whatever side process for quarantine and cleaning. So using technology, but equipping people, even in the future, equipping people with the knowledge to be able to recognize, to think, to understand, is super important. Because ultimately, every way that procurement and finance work, if you think about all the topics we've talked about, greater interconnectivity, greater interoperability is what's coming. And of course, that is the path by which you also open yourself to attack.
And I think the keynote under all of this is what you're taught when I was an auditor: professional skepticism. Just have skepticism about everything, and don't assume anything. Just have that constant skepticism when you see everything.
I know, and hard as it is, even I've had to learn to be skeptical about the emails telling me I've won £1 million. Sadly.
Or the man from Nigeria who's got a shipment of gold for you.
Absolutely. So
Solomon from Nigeria.
Exactly. And, silly examples, but you've seen it in your own inbox. It's no different for your company. It's just the consequences can be just as catastrophic. So there you go. Training, technology, and follow the lead from your IT team.
And one more thing, if you want something funny, just to have a laugh for, it says it's a 10-minute video on, you can find it on YouTube. It's a TED talk by James Veitch, and it's called "What Happens When You Reply to Spam Emails." And honestly, it will crack you. If you haven't seen it, give it a watch. It will crack you up. It's very funny.
Well, there we go. A slight digression for us. I'm sure we'll get back to the world of finance for the next one. But for today, I hope you enjoyed it. And as ever, please leave your comments, even if it's talk about stuff you know. We'll take the hint. But actually, we care. So look, until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.